ready to go.
All right, everybody, we're back for our 3 o'clock session this afternoon. And we have Kristen Johnson from the Children's Center of Southwest Missouri here for you. Kristen, it's all yours.
Thank you. Happy to come see you guys and share a little bit about child abuse with you. So I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about what a child advocacy center is so that you guys know. I can tell you from having practiced in the Joplin area as a nurse practitioner in a pediatric office, I had no clue. I knew that the Children's Center was there. I knew that it was for abused kids, but I had no idea how to get anybody in there. So before child advocacy centers, kids had to tell their stories multiple times. So they would have lots of different interviews. Could be the school teacher, the social worker, the medical professional, social workers, patrol officers, detectives, juvenile officers, and it just went on and on. We do still have that occasionally. We try really hard to not have that happen to kids. So, multiple interviews force the kids to relive their incident over and over again, and it can also hurt the investigation, and the stories become inconsistent with time. So when agencies work independently, children can fall through the cracks and cases can go uninvestigated. So we have 4 children's centers. That's the purpose of us, is we have one in Joplin, Monette, Nevada, and Butler. That is our territory. There are multiple children's CACs all across the state of Missouri and all across the United States as well. So what we do for kids, we do forensic interviews that allow the child to tell their story one time. We do forensic medical exams, that's my part. We do advocacy to help families during the crisis. We do trauma-focused counseling. Sorry, I'm zipping this in here. There we go. Trauma-focused counseling to kind of help the kids as they start working through some of the things that they have gone through. And that has proven to be very helpful. And we also help with testifying in court on behalf of the child if charges are filed. So it doesn't mean that the kid does not have to appear in court. They do. But we can go along, either our advocate can, sometimes our counseling staff will go along with them as well, and then we also testify on behalf of them. So how do we get referrals? Well, a report gets made through the state hotline numbers by schools, emergency rooms, daycares, you guys, the EMTs and firefighters out there, concerned individuals of the community. Children's Division gets notified of the need for an investigation. Law enforcement gets contacted. Sometimes all of this is happening at the same time. An appointment gets made at the CAC just for an interview or an interview and a medical exam, usually within a few days. However, if it is emergent, we have on-call interviewers and medical personnel 24/7. So we actually do come in the middle of the night and see kids, and that's the least favorite part of my job. Is the middle of the night stuff. So now we have 2 investigations going. We have Children's Division, our Child Protective Services, and law enforcement, and they each have their own separate place. Children's Division in Missouri, the Children's Division finds a preponderance of evidence. Whoop, sorry, go back here. Or unsubstantiates the report, and these findings show on a federal background check. The Children's Division worker can also provide home services or referrals for other resources and support. Law enforcement officers gather evidence to present to the prosecuting attorney. Prosecuting attorney ultimately decides if charges are going to be filed. Law enforcement officers include juvenile officers, judges, and physicians can all take children into protective custody, and Child Protective Services receives the children in custody and works with the family in an ongoing case. So in 2023, the Children's Center provided services to 1,024 kids in our 12-county area. Since opening, we've provided services to over 21,000 kids. I haven't seen what this year's thing is. A lot, yes it is. So we're gonna talk a little bit about child abuse, okay? So there's physical abuse. That includes bruises, burns, fractures, abuse of head trauma, also known as shaken baby syndrome. That's what most people know it as still. Sexual abuse, and that includes the commercial sexual exploitation of children, or CSEC, and sextortion, also child neglect and emotional abuse. So, but I mainly want to focus today on physical abuse because that's more likely what you're going to see. And we'll talk a little bit about sexual abuse and about CSEC as well. So physical abuse is a non-accidental trauma or physical injury caused by punching, beating, kicking, biting, burning, or otherwise harming a child. It's the most visible form of child abuse, and physical abuse is often caused from inappropriate or excessive physical discipline. We see a lot of that. So studies have shown that parents that are at the highest risk for physically abusing their kids have experienced physical abuse, like excessive corporal punishment, or they lack social support themselves as a child. They're lonely, isolated, and currently lack social support. They experience low self-esteem, anxiety, impulsivity, depression, or addiction, and they have limited understanding of normal child development. For example, babies cry. They cry a lot. And babies also don't sleep through the night. And also a lot of parents struggle with knowing what is a normal age for toilet training. So we're going to talk a little bit about bruises. So there are some important characteristics of bruises for everybody to know. Non-abusive bruises occur in children who are cruising or walking, and they occur on bony prominences. So think about foreheads, chins, elbows, knees, shins. So think about in terms of, like, if you've ever seen almost every single 1-year-old that you find a 1-year-old picture, they all have a bruise on their forehead. That is a very common place to find them at that age. But remember, that kid is cruising and walking around a little bit. So location matters. Bruises that are concerning for abuse are on protected anatomy, like ears, the upper arms or legs, abdomen, buttocks, genitalia, and the anus. Bruises with patterns are very highly suspicious for abuse. So probably the easiest way to remember this is 10-4 faces P. And this was actually that a child abuse pediatrician came up with this mnemonic. So if you think about trunk, ears, and neck, and the kid is 4 years of age or younger, the frenulum, which you've got 3 of them inside your mouth, both in the upper and lower lips inside and also underneath the tongue, the auricular area, so around the ear, the cheek, the eyes, the sclera, and if it's patterned. But also, if you find any bruising in a child 4 months of age or less, you need to be very concerned that this is child abuse, because kids that don't cruise rarely bruise. So what does this actually look like? Well, the injuries can resemble objects, are most likely from abuse. So you get injuries to the ears, and I did actually, how do I do your, a little shiny thing in here.
Oh,
That's okay.
it will work anyway.
Okay, so you can see that the third picture over on the top is an ear. That is actually a kid that I took a picture of, and that was his ear. He had been slapped or had his ear pinched. So a lot of times we're talking about bruising that's right in there. It can also be on the helix, which is the top part of the ear, so you may see that, or right behind the ears. You can also see things like bite marks, and bite marks are a great one over on the upper far left. Those are bite marks. You can also find slap marks. That's that little baby's face right there. You can see that we've got a handprint. So the 3 lines that you're seeing of red are the areas between the fingers. So that little one was slapped. If you look at the top row on the far right, that one is actually from a spoon. So spoon ones are ones that I see very frequently, and that's a typical pattern you're gonna see where it's clear in the center, that's where the spoon hit, and then the outside of the ring is where the spoon was not present. So if you think about when you hit something and you get a bruise, the area that hits down is gonna be normal flesh color, because what happens is it pushes the blood out. So that's what actually causes the bruise. The one on the bottom row on the far left is a pattern one. That's a cord. You can see ligature marks, and then this the last little kid where you see his butt and his legs. He just kind of got whopped with a whole bunch of different things. So These are also some other ones. The one on the top left, that's from a belt, and you can actually see the stitching from the belt on that. The one on the, let's see, the little boy whose face is covered up, that's actually from being slapped. And then the one on the bottom is actually from a loop of a charger cord, a charger cable. So, kind of remember, the 10-4 faces P, we talked about that. Also remember, look at the age and development of the kid. Kids who don't cruise, so they're not walking around or ambulatory, they rarely bruise. Look at the location of the bruise. Is it on a bony prominence or a fleshy area? And look for a pattern to the bruise. Probably one of the most important things is you cannot date a bruise. Color is not an indication of the age of the bruise. So why does this matter to you? Well, you all are going into homes. You are getting called out to scenes numerous times a day, and you may be checking in and seeing some little kid who is in the house that you're like, that kid looks like they are a baby, they're maybe 6 months old, and they've got marks on their face. So you kind of need to think about, I wonder if something else is going on. So even if that is not your patient that you were there for, you can actually report that. So I want to talk a little bit about abusive head trauma, because this is something that I'm pretty confident that you all have seen or gotten called into. So abusive head trauma is the highest morbidity and mortality of all inflicted injuries. Survivors are often left with permanent handicaps. Typically, the age you're going to see this is between 2 and 8 months of age, but children as old as 6 have also been victims of this abuse. So why is this a big deal? Well, the baby's brain is highly susceptible because the head is disproportionately large compared to their body. They have very weak neck muscles, and the skull is very pliable at the suture line, and the suture lines have not fused yet. And they also have delicate blood vessels between the skull and the brain. So it's caused by basically 2 or 3 different kinds. You can have acceleration, deceleration of the brain from shaking, or you can have blunt force trauma from hitting a hard object, or you can have both. And this is a good indication. This is what the acceleration, deceleration looks like. So you have the baby getting shaken, and they don't have strong neck muscles, so their head sloshes forward, their brain hits the front of the skull, and then they whip back, and their brain hits the back part of the skull too. So I want to go ahead and let's show you guys with our model what this looks like. Make sure I turn my baby on. There we go. Okay. So our babies. We'll let this poor baby cry for a little bit. Just to give you the real idea. You ready? Okay. So if you think about, you have a parent with a baby who's crying and crying and crying and crying and crying, and it is non-stop. And so the tendency is, in frustration, that they shake the baby. And you can see all the parts of the brain that light up. So this baby now, all of the different areas of the brain are completely lit up. They've all been damaged in this. Our poor baby. Okay. All right. Oh my gosh. There we go. I can't turn it off.
Yeah, I think so.
Did you guys get it?
Would you mind doing it one more time?
Yep, sure. shaking?
Walk over there to her if you want. You don't have to stand here.
There you go. That way.
We find that. Yeah. Will you turn it the other way?
Turn it this way?
Turn the camera. Yeah.
So here we have this baby crying and crying and crying. Quit crying! So our baby's in bad shape at this point. Every part of this little one's brain is lit up. So the ability for this little one to make it, if they make it, is pretty hard right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Oh. Yeah, definitely need to be sideways, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So let's talk about signs and symptoms. I know that you all have been called out for seizures before, or for an unconscious baby. And those are some of the severe immediate signs. Some of the less, they're a little bit softer signs, would be a baby that's not smiling, babbling, or cooing. They're extremely irritable. Vomiting is a really prevalent thing, that after shaking that the baby will begin vomiting. They can have breathing problems, be lethargic, they're having feeding problems. They can definitely be pale or have bluish skin. You will also, a lot of times, because of where the parents have held them and how tightly they have, you can actually see bruises on their arms or chest, widened, dilated pupils, and tremors. So the key is that I would tell you is, always think if you get called for a baby, especially a little one, who's having a seizure, you need to kind of keep in the back of your mind that this might be abusive head trauma. So what's the prognosis? Well, only about 25% of these babies will die from abusive head trauma. And those that survive are left with severe neurological deficits and lifelong disabilities that include things like blindness, deafness, learning disabilities, cerebral palsy, seizures, paralysis, and speech and developmental delays. I want to talk a little bit about child sexual abuse too. So, let's talk a little bit about myths versus truths. The myth is you can always tell by physical signs when someone has been sexually abused or assaulted. The truth is, there's only physical signs of sexual abuse or trauma in about 6% of the cases. So why is that? Well, the tissue of the genital and anal areas is made up of very elastic tissues. Think of those areas kind of like a hair scrunchie. And if you know how those stretch out and they go back again, and that's the exact same thing that happens with the genital tissue and the anal tissue. The tissue can heal rapidly, so it's kind of similar to the skin in your mouth. You can bite the inside of your cheek while you're eating and it'll hurt initially, but within hours you may not even notice it. And there may not be any signs inside of your mouth that you even bit it. So this is a big problem because before the age of 18, 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 10 boys will be a victim of sexual abuse. But only 38%, about 38% of kids will ever disclose their abuse. And the average age of disclosure of child sexual abuse is 52 years old. So what are some signs and symptoms? You may or may not see these, but they're quieter. Kids can be quieter. They can become more clingy. A lot of times we'll hear about sleep pattern changes or regressive behaviors, like you have a kid who's previously been toilet trained and now suddenly they're bedwetting or soiling their underwear. They show an advanced knowledge of sexual behaviors long beyond their developmental age. They have acting out behaviors sometimes with aggression toward others, and they can become destructive of property. They can become withdrawn from both family and friends. They can have things like that are vague illness symptoms like a chronic stomach ache. And a lot of times too, we'll see self-harm like cutting or taking excessive risks. And oftentimes, the child has been groomed by their abuser to believe that the sexual abuse is not wrong. And it may even be framed to them as a special secret that they share with the abuser as some form of education for them or even love. Right now, we're seeing a huge uptick in online sextortion, and that is not just this area, that is nationwide. And sextortion occurs when the perpetrator blackmails a child using explicit photos shared online. So a lot of times this will be the kid will meet up with somebody on Instagram or Roblox or Snapchat, and over time the perpetrator, talks to the kid and gets them to send them a picture of, let's say that it's a girl, send them a picture of her breasts, or for a boy, let's say that we're sending a picture of his penis. Sometimes these can be people that they have been in dating relationships with, and then they've broken up, and that's when things will start. They use a lot of photo sharing apps, and suddenly the person is contacting, the perpetrator is contacting the child and says, if you do not pay me X amount of dollars or send me more pictures, then I am going to send all of these pictures to everybody in your school. I'm gonna send them to your parents, to your grandparents. A lot of times they will use like Bitcoin or other ways of sending currency online to pay off the perpetrator. We see and hear about that a lot of times, particularly when it's from people that are perpetrating on kids from overseas. And now that we have the use of AI generated pictures or videos, this is all gonna get made even more difficult to track down, because with AI, they can take just the picture of the person's face and attach it to an artificially created picture or video. So we'll talk a little bit about sex trafficking. I think Laura's gonna come talk tomorrow, so I won't even bother with that we were doing today. So children are often trafficked when they're forced or manipulated into prostitution. Some signs and symptoms that you all can look for. You are the first people who respond most of the time to things like car accidents, or even into different homes. And you may run across this. Looking for things like injuries or bruises. The kids have fear, anxiety, or depression. These kids can become kind of paranoid or be hypervigilant. They are in a relationship with an older individual, usually. They also, that relationship is really kind of very poor in that person, the older individual, is very controlling or dominating. So also, if you ever find a situation where you have teenagers that are cohabiting, you might want to think about that one. You get inconsistent or contradictory personal information, a lot of times lying about their age. You can have stories of large amounts of unaccounted time. So they don't really know they were doing something with their friend, but they don't really know what they were doing. Reports of being up all night, so sometimes these kids that you find are very, very tired. They also can show up with some tattoos that they're very reluctant to show you or to explain how they got them. So what do? Well, if you see something, say something. And I don't care whether you were on the scene and that's not really your patient, but you see something that looks a little suspicious, say something to either law enforcement or call the hotline yourself. Say something at the hospital if you take a kid in and that things just seem a little bit fishy. The story that you've gotten from the parents of why this child is unconscious or the seizure that they're having. Say something at the hospital and say, the story, we've heard 3 different versions of the same story of why this kid is having a seizure or why this kid is unconscious. And don't hesitate to ask or say something. All the hospitals know how to make hotlines. Anybody who's a mandated reporter knows how to make a hotline. And I realize it's not pleasant always to call and to be on the phone for an extended period of time because it's kind of a pain. But it's also important because you may be the one who's rescuing that kid. So that's who we are. We're the Children's Center. We're located over on 7th Street. We love to give tours, so if you ever want to see the place and actually come in, you're welcome to give us a call and we can set that up. So thank you very much for your time.
Krista, if you're okay with it, we'll usually give them a little bit of time to come up
Yeah,
with questions,
that's
and they're about
fine.
20 seconds behind us, so.
Okay,
We had a little lag there when we had all the cameras going, so I'm not for sure how.
It may be a
far
little
apart.
longer.
Yeah, it might be a little more than that. Looks like it caught up a
I
little
need
bit.
one of these.
The clicker?
Do you, I just
did
need.
you get one at Amazon?
Yeah. I need that little thing that I told you you got.
Oh, yeah, don't lose that, you don't need it.
That
tomorrow.
was pretty quick, we've already got one thank you, so
Okay,
they aren't too far behind.
We're not too far behind at all.
No, not
okay.
really.
So you're gonna come back tomorrow morning?
They're
Yeah,
not
it'd be
there.
great.
Oh,
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
so
cool.
you'll be our 8 a.m. speaker then,
Okay.
first thing in the morning.
I already texted the boss, she knows I'm gonna be late, so it's fine. We're good.
Even better. You guys
It
are
took
awesome.
all day, I don't know what
Hey
happened.
man, we'd love to come visit and talk.
Yeah, it's so fun.
I mean, we're here till
It's-
our last one, you guys are our last ones for today, so I
All
scheduled
right,
about 3
see
to
everybody
4,
like me,
so
I got them out early.
we'll have all, yeah, we'll have all doctors in tomorrow.
Oh, ew.
So far, I don't have any questions.
I'm
Krista,
sorry.
these are all
No,
thank
I
yous.
love it.
I'll be the non-cool kid tomorrow.
Nah,
Now you're the cool kid.
perfect. I will
Just
take it.
happy to know that I still know how to treat
There
COPD.
you go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, man. Hey, hang on.
So, had a quick question here, says, did we see an increase from 20, 21, and 22?
Yes, we did see an increase. During COVID, a lot of kids were home, so there were not eyes on in the school. And so therefore, we did see a big, when kids actually returned back to the classroom and were no longer doing online, we saw a big uptick in that.
Yeah, otherwise, I've got comments like very informative, thank you for the presentation,
Yeah.
great job. stuff
Tons
like
of
that.
thank yous.
Lots of thank yous.
Yeah.
I better get thank yous tomorrow. She's gonna be mad.
I'm gonna see if I can't get some more people in.
You're right there.
Are you ready?
It's
All
on,
right.
so.
Love this one.
We are done.
Anything else you wanna say for housekeeping for today or tomorrow or anything?
Everything.
Yep, we'll be back tomorrow at 8. If anybody wants to come in, Children's Center's actually gonna come back in since we had an 8 a.m. Drop in the morning. They're gonna come back. They have another different lecture they're gonna talk with at 8 in the morning. So we will see you all at 8.
All right, sounds good. We're gonna sign off.
Okay.